Hey there, all you fans of Fire Emblem. This is Donovan1 and Mekkah.
Hello.
And welcome to Chapter 4 of my Fire Emblem 5 Paragon Mode 0% Gross playthrough. So Leif has been chasing about the countryside, murdering soldiers of the Empire, using drugs, and looting villages at Sword Point. And no surprise, he's found himself thrown into prison. Lifis has also found himself thrown into a separate cell, mostly because he's already a known criminal. What's happening here, Mekkah? What's going on?
I think this is the biggest dig move in Thracia, and that includes Chapter 2X with the thick fog of war. You get thrown into prison, you only keep two of your playable units, Leif and Lifis, otherwise referred to as the prisoners, and most of your other playable characters are gone. There's 3 new characters that are helping them bust out, and then there's also 2 characters sitting in the cell that want to escape the cell along with Leif.
Right, so the 2 characters that start in Leif's cell are Fergus and Karin. They are a free knight, basically a sword knight, and a Pegasus knight respectively, and because they're both mounted units, they find themselves dismounted in this chapter. Of the 3 saviors, the 3 units who are trying to break Leif out, they are Brighton, Machua, and Lara. Brighton is an axe knight, so he too is dismounted, and he finds himself having some difficulty moving around. But Lara is a thief, and Machua is a sword fighter, so they're having a slightly better time with mobility indoors.
So we just gave mobility to 3 of these green brigands that were in the cell with Lifis. Lifis was kind of uncomfortable with their company, but Lara thankfully let them all out and they split up. These brigands are going to do most of the combat in the early part of this chapter, which is helpful because that way we can spend some time getting our stuff back, because some of our stuff is in the chests around here.
So at the very beginning of the chapter, you might have noticed is I took a quick survey of the map. And this is to figure out where the chests are. The chest configuration in this map is not fixed. The number of chests that you have to obtain in this chapter depends on the number of items that Leif and Lifis were carrying prior to entering this chapter, which is why it was important to manage what they had in inventories at the end of Chapter 3. We made it so that they were only carrying 2 items at the end of Chapter 3, which are Leif's light sword and a speed ring that Lifis was carrying. In addition to that, there are 4 standard items in this chapter that are always here, regardless of what you bring in, and they are a Rapier, a Steel Sword, a Javelin, and a Vulnerary. Of those 4 items, really the Rapier is the most important, because it's our only weapon at this point that's effective against Armor Knights, which you're going to see plenty of in the upcoming maps. The Steel Sword is somewhat helpful, as is a Vulnerary, and the Javelin is totally useless except for selling purposes. So, of these 6 items, the 3 that we absolutely need to get are Leif's light sword, Lifis' speed ring, and the Rapier.
Yeah, nonetheless, Dundon is showing that he has accounted for many possible chest configurations by moving units into cells, into spaces where there's absolutely nothing at all. But he's just showing that he could have traded around the chest key or a lockpick in order to get everything he wanted. And that's pretty impressive, because for first-time players, this is a really difficult map. You're not just having to get used to having a different configuration of units, but you also have to get all these chests. And a lot of new players, when they know that this prison break is going to happen, what they do is they fill up Leif and Lifis' inventory with a lot of stuff that they think they need for the next couple of chapters. And so they end up having to get like 16 chests, and that only makes the chapter harder.
Yeah, so this is one of the chapters where it's really difficult if you take it slowly, and kind of the reason for this is, as Mekkah pointed out, if you bring too many items, then you end up spending more time trying to fight off more enemies that are going to appear later on the map, and the more enemies that appear, the more likely you are to mess something up. For example, you could get somebody captured, and then the soldier can run away with them, or you could get somebody frail killed, even worse. And if you spent like 20 turns on this map just getting all the treasures, and have to reset at that point, then it's pretty depressing. Additionally, a lot of players have trouble managing their weapon uses at this point in the game, because the more enemies that you have to fight, obviously, the more weapon uses you have to go through, and then the more weapons that you have to bring in order to make up for those weapon uses. So for example, we don't have a whole lot of swords to go around right now. We're spending a lot of effort actually just doing small little trade chains and rescue chains to try to manage our positioning and manage our sword uses.
Yeah, something else that can really screw up this chapter is the civilians. They need to escape in order to unlock the guidance chapter that comes after this. All of them do, and we really need to go there because there is a very strong recruitable character over there. These civilians need to reach the exits And from these exits spawn enemy soldiers that will capture the civilians, and they will appear before enemy phase. So if you don't send someone to block them, like Lara is going to do, then they're inevitably going to get captured. You need to kill that soldier to get them to release the civilian, and you get into like an infinite chain of not being able to get the civilian to escape, and that can be really annoying.
So the civilians on the left will escape from the left staircase, the civilians on the right will escape from the right staircase. The soldiers reinforce earlier from the left than they do on the right, which is why we need Lara to be blocking the left, and we release those civilians a little earlier than the ones on the right. And Leif is just kind of like letting them run free over there on the right side, because the soldiers on the right side don't appear for a while. In the meantime, while we're finishing collecting our items, we're preparing to break through these two kind of dickish armor knights that are blocking the way to the exit, and our brigand buddies aren't really doing that well against them either.
Yeah, they're really incompetent actually, because for one, their hit rate isn't that great and the armors have a lot of the defense, and also they really seem to like capturing someone. They don't always capture this many units, like right now, three of them actually have captured soldiers in their hands. It's ridiculous when you think about it, because the odds of them just hitting someone when they're trying to capture is already insanely low. But for some reason they tried really hard in this take.
Yeah, it's I guess this is what happens, you know, if you've been in prison for a while and you haven't been around the company of women very often, sometimes, you know, some enemy soldiers look like pretty decent targets for you. So, Mekkah, what are we actually going for in this chapter? What is the end goal?
Well, it's a prison break, so we need to escape. This is FE5's first escape map, and it is a very different escape from the one that, for example, Path of Radiance tries to do. As some first-time players will find out, if you escape with Leif first, then everyone who is left behind on the map is literally left behind to rot. So they will be treated as captured, which is basically killed. You can get them back later on, but they're not available for the majority of the game. And there's no prompt that tells you, hey, are you sure you want to escape and leave everyone behind? So it can be quite a shock, to say the least.
The game sort of hints that, you know, you're supposed to make everybody escape the map before Leif does, but a lot of players kind of miss that, and also it might not be that well translated in the commonly used translation patch, and we're a lot more used to seeing instructions given to us explicitly as opposed to implicitly. Technically, we don't have to make everyone escape, but we don't want to leave behind anyone right now because we're pretty short on units. However, there are some times later on where it could be strategically useful to ditch some of our army. So, Leif has just opened the door to a death trap, and Leif walks straight in there and manages to dump some blue paint on one of the armor knights. This is, again, another really dickish move on the part of intelligent systems. You can now see that the escape point is within reach, but we have to kind of take an extra turn surviving this death trap and before we can escape. The really bad part about this section of the map is that almost all the enemies in this room have ranged weapons, but almost all of our player units are forced to use swords, so there's like no way to counter them.
Yeah, in addition, it means that they have a lot of ways to gang up on one character, so you have to be really careful with your character placement in order for someone to survive reliably. And even here, we need some dodges to go our way, but thankfully, things like hand axes are very inaccurate, so the chances of dying aren't that high, especially because Karin has such high avoid thanks to her support with Fergus and her naturally high speed and luck, but still it's kind of a luck-based part of the game.
I'm glad you brought up the support between Karin and Fergus, Mekkah, because supports are going to be at their most important in the upcoming sections of the game. These next few chapters are collectively called the Manster chapters by FE5 players, and they're named as such because they take place in the city of Manster in FE5's geography. These chapters are notorious for being very difficult because not only are they long, but the player is forced to rely on imperfect hit rates and shaky dodges very often, and in both of those cases, pushing hit rates by 10% either way has a pretty huge effect.
I want to talk about Delshin real quick. He's an okay armor knight, but his movement is way too low. He's impossible to carry around because of his high build, at least not without losing movement, and he also just kind of sucks at accuracy, so that's unfortunate.
The battle axe is not the most accurate of weapons, although it hits pretty hard, and some players like to bring the brave axe into these chapters so that Delshin is a better weapon to use. The brave axe hits about as hard as a battle axe, but it's a bit more accurate and it hits twice, so it's way more reliable. But we left the Brave Axe on Dagdar, and it's for a pretty good reason, which we'll see when he appears several chapters down the line. Some players also like to bring in the Fire Sword to these chapters, which Fergus can use after training his sword rank a little bit. Not a terrible idea, but Fergus has a hard time getting around, so it's not going to be of that much use. So Leif leaves the map on turn 12 after making sure he hasn't left any of his new friends behind, and that's it for chapter 4. We'll see you next time.
See ya.